Hello and welcome to this chess game analysis of a local club game that I played yesterday. And in this game, we didn't use a clock. That way we could take our time on the moves. And I would also recommend that for improving your game, definitely try to do a little analysis or a review of your games after you complete them. See what mistakes you can find. All right, let's jump into this game here. So I had the black pieces, and my opponent, he starts a little unusually, fianchettoing his bishop immediately. So I tried to do the hippopotamus defense setup once again. But I wasn't able to complete the entire setup. So I just copied here doing the same. He just develops. So here I push my pawn forward because I'm trying to set up this hippopotamus defense where you fianchetto both of your bishops and then you push these pawns here to e6 and d6 and put your knights in behind them. But I wasn't able to complete the entire setup because he had this fianchettoed bishop here. I didn't want to open up weaknesses by trying to fianchetto and him attacking already down this diagonal. So after he castles, I try and do as much of the hippopotamus defense as I can. I bring my knight up here. Although the computer says e5 is best, but right now the game is still pretty even. So we're just developing at this point, getting the pieces out, moving these pawns so I can bring the other knight up. And he's kind of doing the same thing here, except he brought his knights up to maybe a little better positions at c3 and f3. All right, so continuing development, I just decided to go ahead and castle here. Although here it wants me to play a6, which would help maybe keep this knight out of the position. But anyway, he does an interesting move here. He moves his knight to the edge of the board. And generally you don't want to do that because it limits the mobility of this knight. The knight was well placed here on c3 where it controlled the center. But the reason he did this was try and exchange his bishop off for my valuable g7 bishop here, which is helping guard my king. So if these bishops were to be exchanged off, it would leave dark squared weaknesses around my king side here. So I wanted to avoid this trade, and so I moved my knight up here to block that. So now I wouldn't care if he takes my knight because then I could just recapture with my bishop and he would give up his bishop pair. So it said that that was an excellent move, but e5 would have been better to kind of block the bishop with the pawn. So that move would have been slightly better. All right, the game is still pretty even, but white makes an inaccuracy here with d3. So the computer wanted c4 to be played here, which would kind of help fight for the center more. All right, so I play rook to b8, and the reason behind this move is to, well, one, get the rook off this long diagonal so there are no surprises in the later in the game by this bishop up here, and to also fianchetto my bishop, push this pawn forward, and bring this bishop here to try and trade off his light squared bishop for mine and leave weaknesses around his king. All right, so he plays e4, finally pushing in the center here, threatening to attack my knight. And once again, the computer prefers c4 in this position. So I just follow through with my plan of getting ready to put my bishop here. He pushes forward, which the computer says is best. And as we look at this, the game is about even here. So I capture. Although here it says knight to d7 would have been better. So let's take a look at that. So knight to d7. All right. Well, I think I may have thought about that in the game, uh, but I didn't want to retreat here. And then if he captures and I recapture, he could try and exchange off the bishops. So I wanted to avoid the bishop exchange there. So I capture, he recaptures. Although here it recommends capturing with the bishop, but I don't know. Black goes a little ahead in this position. But anyway, the game continues with me bringing my bishop up. It looks like c5 would have been a better move. After a capture, recapture, the queen attacks here. But the computer prefers d4, pushing this central pawn. So my opponent brings his queen to f3, attacking my rook here. So I decide to fight for the center with these queens. I bring my queen out and to a square that opposes his queen, and I'm not worried if he trades off. It'll just bring my knight up, but he could possibly attack. But anyway, in the game, he attacks my queen. So, maybe that's even better. Now he has this backward pawn. So I exchange off, which the computer awards that a great move here. Black goes ahead slightly after this move, after knight recaptures, and then c5. So I finally bring this pawn up here to help stop this pawn, although he could still push this pawn forward, which is probably the best move to get rid of this backward pawn weakness. So anytime you have a pawn that's backwards like this, and it doesn't have any other pawns that can protect it, this can be a pretty severe weakness, a target that you can go after. And also there's a hole here, so sometimes you can place one of your pieces in here and it can become an outpost for one of your pieces protected by this pawn. All right, so here he moves his knight back to c3, which the computer says this is a mistake, that rook to d1 would have been better. So let's see here. It says this is a mistake and that my best move would be rook to d8. Why was this a mistake? Probably because he needs to get rooks in here behind this pawn so he can just push this pawn forward and get rid of this weakness. But I make an inaccuracy here. This is probably not the best move, but my reasoning behind retreating this knight was in case he brought his knight up here to e4 and threatened to jump into d6 here, attacking my rook. But maybe this wasn't a very big threat. So so this was not the best move. Knight to c6 would have been better. Jumping this knight up to a better square and trying to control this d4 square here. All right, so now he plays rook at a to b1 to back up his bishop here, so it's protected. That way he can move his knight and not worry about this bishop of mine capturing his bishop, so now it's protected. So finally I play this move, jumping up here to help control this square with my bishop and knight, and white responds by protecting this backwards pawn here. So I jump into this outpost here, but the computer says that was a mistake, that instead I should have moved my rook here to help target this backwards pawn. Interesting. So that would have been the best move, to put the rook on this half open file and put more pressure on this pawn. And it would help prevent it from moving forward. But anyway, I jumped in there to try and get an outpost, but this allows him to capture, which was the best move. So I recapture with my bishop. And now we have a series of exchanges. He jumps in here, which attacks my bishop with 2 pieces. So I capture his bishop because I didn't want to allow him to capture me. And then if I recaptured, he would have got a pawn out of that. So I capture his bishop. He recaptures with the rook. And now I chase his knight away. Although the best move, it looks like, would have been to develop this terrible knight here that ended up way back here on the first rank. It definitely needs to be improved. So he runs away, and I do jump this knight back up here to fight if he... I was worried about him jumping his knight here to e4 and trying to get into my position. So I bring my knight up here to defend against that. And he moves in there anyway. But now I realize, well, if I capture him here and he recaptures, it gets rid of his backwards pawn. And he would have this open file which he could double up his rooks on and take control here. So I didn't want to allow that. So I just protect my knight with the king, which the computer says that is best. And here it says that he should have just captured immediately. But he moves a pawn up, maybe wanting to prevent my knight from jumping here, which I don't think the knight could have done much there anyway. But I move here to fight for this important half-open D file and to start targeting this backwards pawn. So he doubles up here. And also, I should go back here. There was a threat here. So as soon as I moved here, now there's a threat of me capturing his knight. And if he recaptures, I could capture his rook up here. So that's why he had to double up his rooks to prevent that. So I double up, and now this threat has been renewed, because now if I capture and he recaptures with the pawn, I can capture his rook, and if he recaptures, I capture, and I would come out a rook ahead in this position. So here, interesting, it says that h6 would have been a better move here, which I don't know. I mean, I guess the same thing. It prevents the knight from moving here, but I don't see what the knight could do from there. Maybe reposition back to here. But anyway, I double up. He captures, and it says that's an inaccuracy. Interesting. So it says knight to g5 would have been better, which I see that would keep the knights on the board. The knight could reposition here to f3, and then reposition to wherever. But it probably would have been better for him to keep the knights on the board, just to have another attacking piece. All right. And also, after he captures my knight, that helped me by pulling my king into the center, or closer to the center of the board. So in the end game, you want to bring your kings out, as long as they're not in danger, especially as more and more pieces are traded off the board. The king will become more powerful, and you have to definitely try and use your king in the end game to help you get an advantage. All right, so he pushes a pawn forward, and it said f3 would have been better. So maybe he pushed too far forward here before getting his king up into the center. So anyway, I put my rook here on d4 to stop this backward pawn from being able to move forward. And now I have an outpost for this rook here. So, actually, let me go back here and see what it says would have been best. So, f3 would have been his best move, and here e5 would have been better. Interesting. So, to push my unopposed pawn, I have this pawn majority here of 4 pawns to 3. So, in this circumstance, when you have 4 pawns against 3, it's usually a good idea to push the unopposed pawn, the one that doesn't have any pawns in front of it, and try and trade those off, and until you would have a extra pawn, passed pawn in the end game. All right, so after rook to d4, he brings his king up. King to f2 would have been a little better, but now if we look at the position, the material is even, but black is ahead here by a half to even a full pawn of material. So let's see. h5 is played. Now this move is played to gain space, but to kind of help fight off white's pawns. So if this pawn pushes forward, I'll be able to capture and kind of break up his pawns or reduce the power of them. I still have a pawn majority here, but this just helps fight for this g4 square. All right, so now we have king to f3, although it looks like h4 is what the computer wants in this position, to stop me from moving forward and maybe breaking up his pawns. All right, so I decide to do the same over here, gain more space. If he pushes a3 and then b4, my pawns would help fight off his pawns. So in this position, though, it says g5 would have been better. So to go ahead immediately and attack this f pawn. But in the game, we have g4 played by white, and it says this is a mistake, and a big one. The game has jumped in black's favor here. It looks like king to e3 would have been a better move to help protect this backwards d pawn. And so I capture, which was best. He recaptures, but now it allows g5, although rook to h8 would have been a better move to try and fight for control of this h file over here. So interesting. But I played g5. Black is ahead now. And my reasoning behind that g5 move was this. If he captures, now my king is attacking this pawn with the rook, and I have a chance to target this pawn. And here my opponent makes a mistake on the next move. He just leaves the defense of this pawn and moves his king to the center to e3 here. So I don't know. Here it looks like the best move would have been, let's see. Looks like the computer wants rook to f2. So I don't know. That's interesting. They don't even show rook to g1. Let's see. Rook to g2, protecting this pawn. So that's what I expected. I expected him to just protect. But, okay, now I see why. He's in trouble. If he moves to protect this pawn, then I can just capture here his backwards pawn. So now I see why he realized this pawn, the d3 pawn, was going to fall if he moved a rook to protect this g pawn. And if he didn't, then I can capture here anyway. So I guess he felt, well, this pawn was going to fall anyway. So he moves to the center here. Although rook to g2 is what it preferred in this position. All right. So I capture here, which the computer says is best. He moves to attack. The computer prefers king to e2, but this move attacks a pawn, so I push the pawn forward, and now we have a doubling up of rooks here, although it looks like rook to e1 would have been a better move. So now I bring my other rook up, excuse me, although in this position it looked like rook to g3 with check was the preferred move, and to try and start trading off pieces here. So that's another strategy. In the end game, or any time that you're ahead in material, you want to trade off the rest of the material, the rest of the pieces, because if you trade off more and more pieces, you just use your extra piece at the end to pick off your opponent's pawns and help promote your own pawns. Also, if you're defending and you're behind in material, which I mean by that pieces, not pawns. If you're behind in, even pawns, if you're behind any material, you want to trade off pawns if you are the one behind in material, because if all the pawns are traded off, then your opponent may not be able to win with just an extra knight or bishop in the end, if that's the only piece that's left. All right, so continuing on, rook to h2 is played to try and take control of this open H file. So I start checking his king here. He blocks. I trade off a piece, but I'm able to grab another pawn here. So he captures my rook, and now I just move back here on this fourth rank where I can swing this rook back and forth here if I need to. Also, I thought I wanted to leave the rook on this d file so I could move back here and protect my pawns if he tried to swing his rook back here and attack. So he just checks me, and I move forward, another check, and I just move to the side to block out his king. And now he goes back to his plan of trying to control the H file and swing back around. But the game is pretty much over now, so I'm just ahead by these two extra pawns. He checks me, I move the pawn forward, and I just start moving my pawns up here. And now I'm able to take control of the H file myself, and I'm also protecting this B pawn from here. So he does this to prevent me from pushing this pawn, but now I can just check him, and here he resigns after king to d1, because now I can just pick off this pawn here, and in that position, if I pick this off and then I start marching these pawns, even if he goes after this pawn, these passed pawns here will cause all kinds of problems and win the game. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that little game analysis, game review, and I highly recommend that you review your own games as often as you can. Do that by first just going over the game yourself without the help of the computer, just to see what you can find and exercise your brain. And then after you think you found everything you can, then use the computer to see what you missed. And the computer will definitely find things that surprise you. And if we look at the game review here, so interesting statistics. My opponent played fairly well, 83% accuracy, and I had 89.8. I think he just faltered in the end game with the pawns and the rooks on the board. He kind of, floundered a little and wasn't sure what to do. So, other than that, if he improved his end game play a little bit there, the game would have been much closer. But overall, an interesting game. So, what did we learn from this game? Well, practice your end games and brush up on those. All right, well, the video has gone on for quite some time here, so I will end it. And I hope you enjoyed this chess game review and analysis. Have a great day, everyone. Feel free to like and subscribe, leave comments or suggestions, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.